We'll go ahead and record here. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and bring us to our class. We are on week 2. So let me go ahead and go over to week 2. There we go. All right, so week 1, as I discussed a bit, was setting up your company and getting it so that I can view your company. If you have not followed that step, which I may have to just go grab my book from the other room since I had to switch computers. But if you have not followed that step of sharing this with your accountant, which is me, you'll need to do that. And I still have a few folks that I have to, what it does is it has me accept an invitation to view your files. And so I still have to accept those from some of you in class here. And once I've done that, I'm going to email to those of you who have not yet invited me to view your books and see if that was just a step that you missed or that you're struggling with. I'll also try and stay on this call. I'll stop the recording, but I'll stay on this call for a few minutes if anybody has questions regarding setting your company up still. I know that week 1 is a bit of a struggle just because it does vary a little bit on your browser, and QuickBooks has changed around a couple of the setup steps. But once we get past that week 1 hurdle of sharing your files with me and the initial setup of your company, it will flow a lot smoother the rest of the class. And it does actually work well together where I can view your file and you have free access to QuickBooks Online, which is really nice in today's world. You know, as I talked about in the past, we used to have this class in the lab, and you had to only work on your assignments in our lab because the QuickBooks software was very expensive and only installed on those computers. Okay, all right, so this week we have our meeting today. And please submit your attendance for the meeting today. Today we're going to discuss chapter 2, which if you are finishing up chapter 1, don't worry, because chapter 2 eases us in a little bit more. We look more at the chart of accounts in chapter 2. So what's neat about this is if any of your chart of accounts end up being wrong or need to be changed, it can easily be changed. Most things can be changed in QuickBooks pretty easily. They don't like you to change the legal name of your company once that is set up, but most other things can be changed. But I will try and look over your assignments as quickly as possible. And as I said, anybody that hasn't shared their files with me, please do so as soon as you can, or I will be letting you know, or maybe meet with me at the end of class and we can see if we can get that going for you. Okay, so this week we're going to concentrate on chapter 2, which is the chart of accounts, and a little bit more of the initial setup of companies, and specifically our project 2, which takes the Mookie company that we set up in week 1, and we customize our chart of accounts there a little bit. We work on that because QuickBooks is set up to try and minimize the effort it takes to set up a company. That's good and bad. It's good because it takes less time for you to set it up, and it takes some of the guesswork out of setting up a company. But it's kind of frustrating at times because it's guessing, for instance, the chart of accounts that you want to have set up. So it's likely not going to have every chart of account that you want, and it may have some in there that you didn't want. And so this chapter here, we're going to get a chance to customize our chart of accounts a little bit. You may have also noticed when setting up the Mookie company that it tends to guess at kind of have a default setup of how you should set up your company. And so if the screens from the book were not matching the screens when you were setting up, it's usually okay if you just kind of click forward and accept the initial settings One thing I will mention is that some of the information was given in the first couple pages of the product. It told you that it was a small corporation. So when they asked you like what kind of a company it was, you know, it's a corporation. And it told you what type of products the business was selling. And so some of that could have been useful in your setup of your company. So anyway, project 2 is what your assigned work is for this week, as well as attending class here. We will look at chapter 2 items in class in a few minutes here. I also suggest that you review the PowerPoint for chapter 2, which I will look at as well during class today. And then don't forget to make sure you take your chapter 2 quiz at the end of the week. I find that it's helpful to take the quiz after you've completed practice and this lecture session and your project, and that kind of gets the information from all different sources available to you before taking your chapter 2 quiz. The PowerPoint and your text are good resources for the quiz, as well as the practice exercises at the end, of which I do give you the answers here in our course. Those are great practice when getting ready for the quiz, because there's a practice quiz there, and then also some of what you do in the exercises are things that may be tested on the quiz, as well as what you're doing in the chapter. All right, so we have Zoom attendance. The quiz and exercises are up to you. Those are optional, but I do suggest going through at least some of them. It will help you with the topics for the quiz, and it will help you in regards to setting up the project. It's pretty hard to just go straight into the project without doing any of the exercises, or at least going through the examples that I go through in class. And you'll see here, project 2, when you turn it into the Dropbox, please let me know that you've completed all the activities for the project and you're ready for me to review it. That tells me that I can go into your QuickBooks file and review your work. And then number 2, make sure you type the answers to the questions within the project. It's important that you do that, because I can view your file, but I can't always see everything or know quite, you know, what you did when you completed the project. And so it's important to answer those questions, because that gives me a little bit more knowledge in case there ever was like an error or something that needed to be fixed. Those questions help me identify those. And so last week, same thing. Those questions will help me identify if there's any settings or anything that may have gotten missed when you set up your company, and that way we can fix it going forward. That said, you should be able to do this week's project even if there was, you know, some errors in last week's project for the most part. You should be able to move forward. Okay, and then there's the PowerPoint and the quiz there, and those other things are for, you won't be able to see them, they're in instructor view. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and open the chapter 2 PowerPoint and download it. And while I'm downloading that and opening that, I'm gonna go grab my book out of the room with my other computer where I had it. Okay, here we are. All right, I'm fortunate I had another computer available. Uh-oh. Okay, and this is actually a school computer I'm working on, and it was telling me I didn't have Office installed. We'll see about getting that fixed, but it looks like it's going to work. So let me go ahead and share my screen with the PowerPoint. There we go. Okay. So just a couple of notes from chapter 1. Again, if you have not shared your file with me, please do so. The instructions for that are on pages 66 in your textbook. And I'll let you know if for some reason I see that you haven't shared with me, I won't be able to assign you a grade. So you will need to share your file with me in order to get a grade for week 1 and any coming weeks. So if you have not yet shared it with me, it was pages 66 and 67 of your textbook that tell you how to do that. Maybe some of the confusion on chapter 1 is a little bit that they were trying to show you how to get in and out of your company, and it wasn't totally chronological. On page 55, it started your project, which that was information that you could use in setting up your company. That was page 55 and 56. On page 58, it talked about how to get a QuickBooks code, and that's how you got to access QuickBooks for free. And what I noticed is for most people, it did not lead you to the next steps. So page 58 had some steps that it didn't completely guide everyone through. But eventually, you got to set up your company. Page 65 in your textbook shows you how to log back into QuickBooks. So before I go to chapter 2, I'm going to talk to you about logging back into QuickBooks. Because for today's assignment, you will need to log back into QuickBooks. And to me, the easiest way to do that is I just go to QuickBooks, login. All right, there we go. And I just looked that up, or QuickBooks Online login. There we go. Make sure you use the word online. So you're going to QuickBooks Online login. And I found the site here. They gave you a website address in the textbook on page 65, but to me, I don't know if it was quite as direct, because when I just go to QuickBooks login, there's a sign-in screen here, and it allows me to log in. So that's just a shortcut. The website they gave you, let me go to that. It's qbo.intuit.com. Did I spell that right? There we go. Oh, okay. Since I'm already logged in, it just automatically brought me there. See, so it just depends on the browser that you have. You'll get used to the process. But when I went to go log back in, I just Googled QuickBooks Online login. And you should have set up your password and username after you got your license. So the first step was to get your license code free through QuickBooks, which required you to verify your attendance at Clatsop with like a class schedule. That's why I don't have the student version. I don't have a class schedule to be able to verify with, but I do have an educator version. They had to verify with Clatsop that I was an educator. And that was the first step. Then the second step was setting up Mookie, which is pretty much naming the company and telling what kind of company it was. But before you could get into QuickBooks, you did have to type in that initial license and product key that they gave you. Anyway, and then you have to log back in. So there was some steps there. But now that we're on week 2, you're going to log into your company each week at that QuickBooks login page. And make sure your QuickBooks Online login page. Okay. All right, let me share my presentation. There we go. Well, I think. Okay, yeah, there we are. All right, so chapter 2, I already talked about, is your chart of accounts. So I'm going to go ahead and start talking about our chart of accounts and relate that to your project and items for this week. And for this, we're going to go ahead and go to the sample company and look at the chart of accounts. I'll do that in a minute here. The sample company is nice because it allows me the chance to have a company to show you around, because I don't have the student version. But it's also nice because you can't mess it up. And so we're going to just look through the chart of accounts and learn a little bit more about the chart of accounts and how to display chart of account numbers and how to set them up, and just a little bit more details about them. All right, so this is just an overview of what we will look at today. And just a review of last week and how this course is set up. It always starts with the chapter material being working with the sample company, and that you don't have to worry about making mistakes or errors because it resets itself. And then at the end of the chapter, there's practice and exercises that I've provided answers for you to try on your own. And then finally, you work on the project, and the project is going to cover the tasks from those 2 items. Again, you'll find it much easier to do the project if you've done the items before. All right. Okay. So each week we'll learn that way, where we'll do some practice, and then you have some practice on your own in a project. All right. So we are still on part 1 of learning QuickBooks, which is the settings, the company setup, and the chart of accounts. Starting next week, we're going to look at transactions, where we have purchases and sales, payroll, those kind of things. And then finally, at the end of class, we'll do the reports. And so you'll see here, we're on this chart of accounts is what we're on this week. All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go to the sample company. So that is in chapter 2, and it starts on page, well, I'm going to start on page 74. So it's section 2.2 on page 74. And I'm going to go ahead and follow the link in the PowerPoint, but this web address is given in the textbook as well. Yeah. Okay, it didn't like me opening that. So I think what I'll do is I'll just type in the web address here. All right, and the web address is you shouldn't have to. You should be able to follow the link in PowerPoint. Oh, you didn't. Okay, I must have typed something wrong. And yeah, it should work from the PowerPoint for you. For me, it didn't, because my computer is not liking the version of PowerPoint I'm using. All right. I've got to figure out with the school how to get that updated. Okay. And let me go ahead and share this screen with you. Well, Let's try this again. Maybe it didn't like it's making me verify that I'm not a robot. It may not have liked my answers here. Sorry about that. It does not like my answers to not being a robot. Don't you all like it when they want to verify that you're not a robot and they give you something that's so incredibly difficult that you seem to turn in to be a robot? Sorry about that. It's taking a minute to load here. Well, now mine is saying that it won't work. I'm not sure why. Let me see if I can. I think it's because it doesn't like my robot answers. You do have to verify that you're not a robot every time you enter this. Okay, and it does not like that. Okay. All right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and go on here while I try and open that company. I'm gonna just discuss a few things while I'm working on that. That way you're not waiting for me to do that. The sample company resets each time. So we talked about that last week. What I find helps is to go ahead and every time you open the sample company to change that account and settings to the 3 hours so that you don't get taken out of there before you should be. Yes, so I just suggest doing that. When you're in your company, you don't need to do that because your company doesn't log you out automatically. The other thing is your company saves everything you do. So you do want to be careful, and that's why I highly suggest going through the practices and things before jumping right into the project. Okay, so I finally got this to open. Oh, good. And it has me on the right screen, it looks like, to share with everyone. Okay, so here is Craig's Landscaping Services, back open. And what I'm going to do is go through those steps really quick on, so page 74 was just getting back into this company. And I think I was answering that are you a robot questions wrong, and that's why it wasn't letting me in. I guess I couldn't tell if some of the things were bridges or bicycles. All right, so page 75, we're gonna increase the time to log out to 3 hours. And to do that, and I'm gonna do this part fast since it's review from last week, you go to the gear icon, and then under your company, you click account and settings. And then we click advanced. and we scroll down here to other preferences. There we go. Let me move my. Okay, down to other preferences, and then we can, the sign me out option, we click on that, and I'm going to put that to 3 hours. There we go. Let me put that to 3 hours. There we are. And click save. All right. We click save, and then you click done. Done. You'll do that at the beginning of every time you go to your sample company. Like I said, that just means that if you take a break, you're not going to get thrown out. And that is all of page 75 and 76 in your text. All right, so that is section 2.2. So you'll see they start you off, you know, at a reasonable pace here. The idea of this first couple of weeks is to get you a chance to practice navigating around. All right, so section 2.3 is page 77, and we're going to look at the chart of accounts now. In this section. All right, so let me go back to our sample company. There we are. And at the bottom of page 17, it says select accounting. So chart of accounts affects your overall accounting picture. And so it's in the menu called accounting. You'll see on the side, we've gone over these menus, but they're grouped by topics. Things that have to do with banking specifically, sales specifically, payroll specifically are grouped into those menus. Accounting menu is for things that are for the overall company. So the chart of accounts affects your overall setup of your company. And so we click the accounting menu and then go to chart of accounts. Most accounting softwares, not just this one, are set up in these kind of grouped up menus. QuickBooks Online tries to use more everyday language, so they call them like expenses. In some other accounting softwares, they will call those like accounts payable, and that's where they will put all of the expenses and any of the accounts payable, and that might be where they also run checks to pay their accounts. So my goal with this class is to show you QuickBooks Online, but to also give you the tools that if you were to use a different accounting software, you could navigate your way around as well. And that's where it is a bit frustrating if there's a menu that's a little different than what they're showing in the text. But by learning the general format of an accounting program, you know, we can learn how to click your way around and find things that we need, you know, if we don't have exact directions on it. Okay. So chart of accounts, I am on, that was page 77 where we went to the chart of accounts, and I have to go this extra step and click see your chart of accounts or it won't show up. And so that's how we get to our chart of accounts. So that's page 77 and 78. Now at the bottom of page 78 and 79, we're going to go ahead and display our chart of account numbers. I am an accountant, and so I personally like seeing my chart of account numbers. I'm just used to that, but this is set up default that the account numbers are not showing. But they're going to go ahead and on page 79, it says select the gear icon. Gear icon. And then we're going to go to accountant settings. You'll notice we've used this menu a couple times. This is where you adjust your settings for how your company is set up and displaying in the software. All right, and we're going to select advanced again. And then we're going to go down to the chart of accounts. Where'd it go? There it is. It's in the middle here. And these accountant settings are how we want, you know, our chart of accounts to be set up. And so we can click this pencil. This is when we want to edit things. You click the pencil, and then we want to enable account numbers. There we go. So we want to enable the account numbers. And I'm going to go ahead and click save. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry. And I want to enable them. That is step number 4. Step 5, we actually do want to show them as well. So not only are they enabled, but we're going to show them. So make sure you click this checkbox, and then you're going to click save. And so for our project, when they ask you to, you know, enable and show your account numbers, you'll want to follow these steps. Okay. And then we need to click done. All right. Now when our chart of accounts shows up, it should show our numbers. Okay. All right, next page. Let me make sure my stuff saved okay. I'm working on a different computer, and it yeah, my savings didn't save, or my settings didn't save. There we go. So make sure you enable and show account numbers. Click save. Oh, I see. There's an error message. Yeah, that's not going to work here. I noticed this happened to me with the sample company. I don't know if it's because it thinks I have the sample company open twice, or if it's a problem that QuickBooks is having with the sample company, but it is not allowing me to save any changes that I make. I have a feeling it's because it's a sample company and it's set up so that you can't mess it up, and then that in turn makes it so that we can't save this setting. So it's not going to save this setting, at least not right now. It's not. This is another one that I've gotten it to work in the past, but it required me to exit and enter QuickBooks and delete all my cache out of my system and whatnot. And I'm not going to spend class time to do that, but anyway, those are the steps you would follow. And for your company, it will work because it's allowing you to save to your own company. This is a company that's practice, and so it's not allowing me to save. All right. That is how you would get the account numbers to show, and the ability to assign account numbers to your chart of accounts. Instead of just names, we would assign numbers to them. All right, and that is what the directions on page 81 would say, or sorry, not 81, page 79. That was 79 and 80. Page 81 is where we can go ahead and it says select accounting in the navigation bar and go to chart of accounts tab. We were actually already there, but that's where the book, sometimes you might be confused. It sometimes assumes that maybe you've exited out of the screen you were in. Okay, and then if necessary, see your chart of accounts. Notice the chart of accounts now displays a number column. It did not let me save that setting, and so the number column is not there, but you could see the picture on page 81. That's what will show when you go ahead and enable your number and your number column there. If it were there, you would see them. Okay. So step 4 here asks you to click the edit pencil, which is here on the top right, kind of middle part of your screen there. And when you click that, you can edit your accounts. If it were showing the number, we could edit the number, but you can edit the names of your accounts here as well. And that's what that edit pencil will do. Okay. All right, so that's page 81. I'm going to go ahead and cancel that because we're just looking around the program right now. We're not really saving things. That's kind of the idea with this sample account or sample here. Okay, page 82, towards the bottom, we're going to look at how we view our QuickBooks registers. Registers are the detailed information for these different accounts. So if we want to see our check register or what all happened to that account, we can look at a register. So from this chart of accounts window, step 1, page 82, you can select view register, and you see that menu item over here. And if I click on it for the checking register, it will show our checking register and every different thing that kind of went and happened, all the different checks and deposits we have in our account. So that's a really handy feature because you might be like, wow, I have only $1,000, $1,200 in that account. I thought it was a lot more. And you can go and look and see what has happened there. And you'll see it's just like, for those of you old enough to have used an actual check register where you wrote your checks and you wrote down, there's a running balance there on the right of what's in your account at any given date. All right, step 3 there at the bottom of page 82. Select back to your chart of accounts. So this is this little blue menu and little arrow thing. If you want to go back to where you were, not the detail, but back to that chart of accounts, you click on that menu item there. Okay, and that brings you back to your chart of accounts. All right, page 83 is a picture of pretty much everything we've just done here. All right, so that is section 2.3, where we talked about the chart of account numbers, how to display them. Section 2.4, we are not going to work with the sample company, but I want to talk about it briefly here. Section 2.4 discusses aligning the QuickBooks chart of accounts with the tax return. With our Mookie, the Beagle company that we set up in Chapter 1, the information about the company in the beginning pages, which was 55 and 56, let us know that it was a small corporation. Later in the project, as you were setting things up on page 67, under the questions actually, P1.1.1, specifically told you that to pick a tax form of small business corporation with 2 or more owners, form 1120S. So this is a corporation, and form 1120S is the tax form. 1120 is a corporate tax form that any corporation files. 1120S is specific to a small business corporation, which is an S Corp versus a traditional C Corp. So those of you that have taken Business 101 or what we've talked about in the first accounting course, a C Corp is your traditional corporate setup. An S Corp is a corporation, but it's taxed just a little bit differently. And so the tax form is an 1120S. And that's mentioned on page 84, the different tax forms that go with the different organization types, whether it's a sole proprietor, partner, corporation, or S Corp. This is brought up because the way that you set up your chart of accounts can be influenced by the tax form that you file, because tax forms what the IRS does is they make businesses categorize their accounts according to the IRS categories. So they may have things like maintenance expense. Well, maybe in your chart of accounts, you called it like cleaning expense and plumbing expense. Well, for your tax return, it's called maintenance expense. So as a company, you may choose, you don't have to, you may choose to set up your chart of accounts to more closely align with the tax return categories. It just makes it easier to complete the tax return at the end of the year. Or if you hire an accountant to complete your corporate tax return, they have an easier time categorizing your expenses if they're already in these IRS type categories. Again, you do not have to, but you can. And the examples of those tax forms are at the IRS website. And then you'll, in our project this week, they mention it as well. And I'll get to that in a minute. Anyway, section 2.4, please read through that, just about what this is. All right, section 2.5 now, on page 85, we're ready to go and explore a little bit more. And in this case, we're going to edit our chart of accounts to align with the tax return a little bit more. And your chart of accounts should also cater to your company's needs. And what I mean is the categories that you track for expenses, for instance, there are things that maybe you want to track. So for instance, maybe maintenance is too general of a category because you're putting all kinds of things there. Maybe you do want to have it separated into plumbing maintenance or electrical maintenance. It depends on your type of company. Or utilities, for instance. That could be your light bill, or your electric bill, your water bill, your sewer bill, or maybe you want to separate those out separately so that you can track your electric bill separate from all of your utilities put together. So one way that you can align with your tax return is to maybe have an account called utilities, but then maybe add sub-accounts. So they're all utilities, but they're sub-accounts with the specific utilities. And this will help for your reporting purposes for your company if you ever want to track those separately. But then maybe the IRS says that we just want to know the total utilities expense. We don't want to know them separately. So that's why you may set up accounts and what's called sub-accounts, is to align with your tax return or just to align with your business needs in general. Sometimes your financial statement can get way too long if you have 50 million different expense categories. So you could have the main account like utilities and then have the detail if you need it, but then maybe for your financial statement, just show the main account. All right, and I'll talk about that in a bit, but this is what's important to, in this class. It's not just learning how to use QuickBooks Online, but it's kind of learning how, if you were to help a company set up their chart of accounts, or if you worked at a company and needed to add or redo their chart of accounts, to look at what is useful and works for that business. All right, so page 85, it looks like. It says edit QuickBooks chart of accounts. So let me go ahead and share our sample company again. And instruction 1 on page 85 says, from the navigation bar, pick accounting, and then chart of accounts, which were actually already there. And then there's this new button at the top. Instruction 3 says select new. And you'll see here, this is how we add a chart of account. This is where you add one. And when you do this, it brings up this screen, and instruction 4 says from the account window, select account type bank. So we're going to set up a bank account. But if you were going to set up a different kind of account, you need to pick the appropriate category. We just happen to be setting up a bank account here, so we're going to leave that at bank. And then step 5 here says select the detail type. which is savings. So it is a bank account, but more precise, it's a savings account. So we pick the detail type here, and then we're giving it a name. We're just going to go ahead and call it savings, but if you had more than one savings account, you know, you could say savings at US Bank, savings at Columbia Bank, you know, to differentiate them. Okay, so that was step 6. We entered the name savings. If it's not a sub account, make sure that it's unchecked, which it's not, so we need to leave that unchecked. And because we said that we were giving account numbers, that field is showing up here, but I'm not gonna worry about that now because our sample here does not give it an account number. So let's go ahead and click Save and Close, which we would normally do. Actually, they said just go ahead and cancel, but normally you would click Save and Close so that your new account would now be there. All right, so page 86 goes through those same steps, but in the picture, you know, screenshot format. Page 85 was the directions in written format. Page 87, adding a sub-account. So let's look at instruction 1 there. From the chart of accounts window, click New. And from the account window, pick expenses. So we're gonna make an expense account here. And detail type. This is what I was talking about. QuickBooks tries to guess the most common types of accounts you have to try and limit the amount of work you have. But you may have an expense that's not listed here. In that case, you know, you may have to pick like other business expenses if your is not listed. This one asks us to pick utilities, and that one is listed. But again, they'll only have the most common types here. So the kind you want may not be listed there. All right, and then under the name, it says we're gonna call this water, sewer, oops, trash and trash. And this one, we do wanna call it a sub-account because that's only some of the utilities, it looks like here. And we're not filling in a description. That part's optional. Just so you know, the things with the red stars here you gotta have. So the sub account, we clicked that check mark there. That was step 5. Step 6, from the drop down, you have to go ahead and find your utilities again because the computer is asking us here what this is going to be a sub account of. And so you'll see we have water, sewer, and trash that we're making here. We already have gas and electric set up and telephone. So this is another sub account of utilities. So I'd click utilities. This is a utilities type expense and it goes under water, sewer, or specifically it's water, sewer, and trash. Okay. And we click Save and Close. And now we would have our new account there. And that is page 88. I'm gonna go ahead and move to page 89. All right, from the chart of accounts window, which is where we're at, select the drop-down arrow next. Okay, wait, let me make sure I didn't skip a. From the chart of accounts window for the utilities account, select the drop-down arrow next to Run Report. Okay, so we're in the chart of accounts window. I need to scroll down to my utilities account. Keep in mind that your chart of accounts is always listed in the order of assets first, then liabilities, then equity accounts, then income accounts, and then expense accounts. Okay, and so utilities is an expense, so it'd be listed towards the bottom. And then it's also here in alphabetical order. And so instruction one asks us to go to that utilities account, select the drop-down arrow next to where it says Run Report. So this little arrow here. and we are going to select edit. And now we are going to change the account name to utilities expense. And that is instruction 3 here, and click save and close. So you can see if we ever need to change the title of an account, this is how we do that. Or any other items from within the account that you may need to edit, you do it that way. So you can see here, it's possible to edit most things in QuickBooks Online. There's a couple of things that QuickBooks makes it really hard to edit, but pretty much everything can be fixed or changed as needed. And that's the same with most accounting programs. Okay, so that was page 89. We learned how to edit a QuickBooks account. And page 90 shows that in picture version. At the bottom of page 90, we discuss inactivating QuickBooks accounts. And on the page 91, it gives us some steps here that I'm going to follow on how to inactivate an account. I want to make a note here. The reason you would inactivate an account is because in accounting systems, not just this one, they do not you usually cannot just delete a chart of account. I will say that. The reason for that is if there's any sort of accounting activity within an account, if you were to delete that, you would never be able to go back and see what happened within that account. And you might say, oh, but it has a zero balance. That may be fine, but 3 years ago, maybe you did use that account and you may need to go back to that activity from 3 years ago. You just never know. Or maybe it was all an error and you never should have used that account, but accounting systems are set up that they want to make sure you don't delete something you shouldn't. And so because of that, if you have ever used a chart of account, like if you've never used it, it will let you delete it. But if you've ever recorded transactions in it, most accounting softwares are set up that they do not allow you to delete a chart of accounts. And that is for your protection. However, it is kind of annoying. Oh boy, how it is kind of annoying because sometimes you're like, I really don't want that chart of account. And if you don't delete it, especially at a bigger company where you have several different staff entering accounting transactions, people might accidentally use that account. That's happened to me a lot where you're like, how come this expense didn't get recorded? And then you go through the books and realize they were using an account that you thought, you know, was not active anymore, you know, that you weren't supposed to be using. And so it's important, if there's an account that you don't want to be using, that you inactivate it. Again, accounting softwares don't like you to delete it, but you can do what's called inactivating it, which is nice because it won't show it in your main menus. You can get to it if you need to down the road, or you can reactivate it, but it kind of gets it out of your choices so that people don't accidentally use an account that they shouldn't. Okay, on that note, I noticed that it's now showing my account number column here. Anyway, all right, so page 91, to inactivate an account from the chart of accounts window, which is where we're at right now, for the water, sewer, and trash account. So let's go down. That was under utilities and it was a sub account here. Here's our water, sewer, trash account. Select the drop-down menu next to run report. And there's a choice to make this inactive. And notice how that menu said this reduces usage. This will reduce usage because it still technically exists, that chart of account does, but it won't show up in your choices automatically, and it won't show up like on your financial reports usually. Okay, unless you ask it to show inactive accounts. All right, so we went ahead and said yes when it said, are you sure you want to make it inactive? And we did that. And so that's chart of accounts. That's how to add a chart of accounts. That's how to make a sub account chart of accounts. It's also how to edit the accounts and how to inactivate them. All right, let me go back to my presentation here. There we go. So we went over adding accounts, adding sub-accounts, inactivating accounts, and editing accounts. Again, you cannot delete accounts. If you accidentally make one, I think sometimes you may be able to, if you don't get any activity in there, it may let you still delete it, but usually it is set up that it will not let you, and you will have to just go in and inactivate it. So if you, in this next chapter, accidentally create a chart of account that you aren't going to use or didn't mean to make, then you can make that inactive. All right. In the last section of this chapter, it talks about some accounting essentials. Some accounting essentials are at the last sections of some of the chapters in this book. You saw that a little bit with chapter 1. I assume that everyone in here has either taken an accounting course here at Clatsop or has some sort of accounting background from somewhere. And so I assume that you have some accounting knowledge. Going over these last little bits in the chapter are sometimes helpful as review because, yeah, there will be information that could be on the quiz in here, but also the idea is to present just some accounting topics because they will be helpful as we go along in the software. This one here talks about the financial statements a little bit and the chart of accounts. Without going over the rest of the chapters, some of you may be wondering why the chart of accounts is important, but the chart of accounts are the accounts you set up and essentially will flow into your balance sheet and your income statement and your statement of cash flows. And so to have ending reports that are useful to the reader and to management and in decision making, it's important to have chart of accounts that are meaningful. So for instance, we had that utilities account. For your tax return, the IRS may just want the total of utilities, but for management purposes, you may want to have separated out. I worked at a fish processing company and we definitely wanted separated out the cost of our water versus the cost of our electricity because or trash and sewer, we were monitoring our water usage and our electricity usage, and it could vary widely depending on what type of fish was being processed. And so it was definitely something we wanted to track separately. And so having those sub-accounts set up or just totally separate accounts set up for those is important. Keep in mind that your balance sheet only shows your asset, liabilities, and equity accounts. Your profit and loss, also called the income statement, is your revenue and expense, which then shows your net income. In QuickBooks, they call it a profit and loss statement, I believe, and we will look at that in the last chapter of our class. Because again, QuickBooks really caters to try and capture everyone's level of knowledge of accounting. And so it's supposed to be very user-friendly and will use a lot of terminology that is more everyday language instead of accounting type language. That is why it would be called like a profit and loss statement versus an income statement, which we learn in accounting. Okay. All right. So that's just a little bit about the financial statements there. Actually, before I end that, I also want to mention, and I'll talk about this in a minute here a little more too, but we're creating a chart of accounts, and you'll find with your project that it will require you to make some accounting type decisions. Like I'll use the hardest one as an example. You have to set up unearned revenue account. Well, unearned revenue is one of mine that has always bothered me because the account has the word revenue in it, but it is not a revenue account. It is actually a liability account. And so when you're setting up some of your chart of accounts in the Chapter 2 project, you'll have to make some of those decisions on your own based on your accounting knowledge. And so that's one of the hard ones, is unearned revenue is actually a liability account. All right, so make sure when you're setting up those chart of accounts that they are in the proper account type category. And on page 94, it discusses a little bit more of where some of these accounts fall. Same with page 95, actually reviews assets. So if you need some of, you know, not 100% sure of which accounts are assets, liabilities, equity, profit and loss accounts, the rest of this chapter gives a nice review here. It also talks about permanent accounts. Those are your balance sheet accounts, versus temporary accounts, which are your income statement accounts, and they're called temporary because they get closed every year. Balance sheet accounts do not close out every year. Income statement accounts do. All right, I'm gonna go over a couple of the Chapter 2 project details with our last few minutes. And just wanna remind everyone, the Chapter 2 practice quiz, definitely do that. It doesn't take a lot of time, and it will help you with the actual quiz. And I have the answers posted in the mod, or in week 2 in our course. Then there's exercises in the text. I suggest, you know, going through some of these. It just helps you learn more about QuickBooks. And sometimes you may run into a quiz question that, again, one of these might help you answer. Let's see here. I see, yeah, so there's several of those. You know, if you're running low on time, maybe you don't have time to complete all of them, but try to complete as many as you can. Most of them aren't too, you know, aren't going to take a ton of time, and they're just good practice. The more practice you get in this QuickBooks Online software, the better you'll be at QuickBooks Online, but you'll be able to transfer that knowledge to other types of accounting softwares and databases too. All right, so project 2.1 starts on page 114. I will try and look over everybody's companies as soon as possible, but no worries if, go ahead and start on project 2 if you're ready. Don't worry for me to get back to you because we can always change things if need be. But if you do have any problems, like you haven't been able to establish your company yet, you can either stay on afterwards or email me, and we'll see what we can do to get that going. All right, so page 114 starts your project, but page 116 is more where it starts the instructions for the project. And they start off logging you back into your company. If that, they give you the website qbo.intuit.com. If that doesn't get you to the right login screen, just Google, like I did, QuickBooks Online login, and sign in that way. But page 116 shows you how to log back into your company. And then page 117 starts the activities for project 2. And you'll see the first one there, you're going to be aligning the chart of accounts with the tax return. And they show you a copy of the tax return for a small business or for a S Corp, which is an 1120S. And it just shows you why, you know, you can see some of those categories, like repairs and maintenance is one of the categories. And so they're trying to take the chart of accounts to make it easier to do the tax return at the end of the year. Okay, and so the first question actually is on page 118 and just has you look at that tax return and match up which line it is on the tax, which expense, what line it would go on the tax return. P2.1.2, which is at the bottom of page 118, starts you off on what do I want to call it? Adding slash, editing your chart of accounts. So this project here, the idea is to get you more familiar with the chart of accounts and to customize it for Mookie company here. That's the general idea with this chapter, is to customize Mookie's chart of accounts and to add or edit any accounts that you need to get it to where it's going to be functional for Mookie. Again, once we get to chapter 3, if some reason a chart of account didn't get added, you can always add it later. Okay, or if it's not, if you didn't put it in the right category, you can always change that stuff. That's what's really neat about accounting software. Back when accounting was done fully in pen and paper, which wasn't that long ago, it was very hard to change things. But with this, you change your chart of account, it automatically is now going to change your balance sheet and financial statement reports to reflect the appropriate thing as well. All right, so instruction. So the first item on page 118 in the middle, under P2.1.2 says to add accounts to the chart of accounts from the navigation bar, select accounting and new. I'm just going to go through this very first one with you. And I'm on the sample company, but it works the same. You'll go to new in the chart of accounts. And this one has you set up a bank account. So it says, letter A says select account type bank. Letter B says select detail type. They have just a line there. That means they want you to use your judgment to pick the appropriate detail type. So in this case, looking at it, it's a checking account. So I'm going to write checking there because letter C says it's going to be called checking. So I know under detail type, the appropriate detail type would be checking. And then it says leave the description number blank, sub account unchecked, save and new. And of course, it's not letting me save this because I'm in the sample, but okay, and number 2 there has you add the accounts receivable account. If you go to new, you would, accounts receivable is already just an already set up choice that you have. And so I just clicked accounts receivable there for letter A. Letter B, the detail type, it automatically populated accounts receivable for me, and that's what I want. Then letter C, we type in the name accounts receivable, which is already written in there for us. Again, the computer's, again here, guessing what we want to call it. We left the sub account unchecked, and then we're ready to click save and new. Number 3 on the top of page 119 says you go ahead and add that account, and they want other current assets. So there we go. Other current assets, detail type. Ooh, So under here, you look and see what's appropriate. It just happens that there's other current assets. If you're ever unsure or there's not a specific category, you can always put it into like other of that category. So let's say it was an expense. You can always say the detail type is like other expenses if there's not an exact choice. Under this case, they're calling it undeposited funds, and you type that in, and then we click save and new. So for these, you will have to use a little bit of judgment. I gave the hint here that the unearned revenue is indeed a liability account. That one is number 3 on page 120. And for that, they don't have that specific account type. So you might have to say that it's an other current liability because they don't have unearned revenue as a specific account choice. So, And if you look down, what they are doing is they're having you fill in some of the blanks, but they give you information. So on the letter B there, it shows the detail type as other current liabilities. So that gives you a hint as to how it should be set up as well. All right, and so the rest of this project will have you add some accounts, add some sub accounts, and show you how to display and enter account numbers. And just a little bit more about the chart of accounts. That part I will let you do on your own. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording here.